Welcome to Navigating the Vortex, a deep dive, big picture analysis of contemporary geopolitics and geoeconomics. Today, Putin and Zelensky play for time. But waiting for Trump's ultimatum to run out won't get either side closer to victory. Another round of direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine took place in Istanbul on July 23. This was the third meeting between the two sides since face-to-face meetings resumed in May. The previous two rounds yielded very few concrete results, apart from agreements on prisoner exchanges and the return of the bodies of soldiers killed in action. They did, however, demonstrate two things. First, both sides remain very far apart on what they would consider acceptable terms for a ceasefire, let alone a peace agreement. And, second, neither side is prepared to walk away from the negotiations, fearing to incur the wrath of Donald Trump, the U.S. president. Consequently, expectations for the third round were very low, and the negotiators did not disappoint in delivering almost nothing after their shortest meeting yet, which lasted just 40 minutes. They agreed on another exchange of prisoners and on setting up 3 working groups on political, military and humanitarian issues to engage online rather than in face-to-face meetings. A fourth round of negotiations has not been ruled out, but it is unlikely to involve the two countries' presidents, given that their negotiating positions still offer little hope of a deal ready to be signed at a leaders' summit. As if further evidence was needed that these talks are mostly performative exercises devoid of any sincere effort to bring the fighting to an end, within hours of the meeting in Istanbul ending, Russia and Ukraine launched fresh air attacks against each other's Black Sea shores. While all this appears to mirror the patterns of the previous 2 rounds of talks, this third round, however, took place in a different context than the earlier 2 meetings. On July 14, Trump set a deadline of 50 days for the fighting to stop. If this deadline passes without a ceasefire agreement, he will consider imposing hefty secondary sanctions on Russia's remaining trade partners, in an effort to starve Moscow's war economy of crucial foreign income. To date, the Kremlin has been able to sell heavily discounted oil and gas to willing buyers like India and China, both of whom are also critical to sustaining Russia's war effort by supplying explosives and engines for Russia's drone fleet. The first 10 days of this 50-day ultimatum have now passed. While the talks in Istanbul might be seen as a sign that Kyiv and Moscow are taking Trump seriously, the lack of tangible results suggests otherwise. There is no indication that either Russia or Ukraine have moved from their maximalist demands. Russia keeps insisting on the recognition of its illegal occupation in Ukraine, on future limits to Ukraine's military strength, and on a permanent blocking of the country's accession to Nato. Ukraine meanwhile asks for its territorial integrity to be restored and its sovereignty, including its ability to determine its alliance arrangements, to be respected. Nor do developments on and around the battlefields in Ukraine offer any signs that Moscow or Kyiv are ready even for a ceasefire. Russia keeps making incremental gains along the 1,000 kilometers of front lines in Ukraine. And the Kremlin keeps pounding Ukrainian cities, including the capital Kyiv, with nightly air attacks at unprecedented scales of hundreds of drones and missiles that have repeatedly overwhelmed Ukraine's already stretched air defense systems. Yet, Ukraine has been buoyed by the promise of more U.S. arms deliveries, paid for by other NATO allies, and the continuing commitments by its international partners to support the country, including at the recent NATO summit in The Hague and the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome. Add to that Trump's apparent pivot away from Putin and his recently more constructive relationship with Zelensky, and it becomes clear why Kyiv, like Moscow, thinks that time is on its side. Both may be proven wrong. Zelensky's latest efforts to consolidate his power, a large-scale cabinet reshuffle and a decree to curb the independence of 2 of Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies, have caused alarm among EU officials in Brussels. More importantly, they have also triggered rare public protests against the government in Kyiv and other major Ukrainian cities, including Dnipro, Lviv, and Odessa. The protests may not get enough traction to pose a real danger to the government, but they indicate that support for Zelensky is not unconditional, something that the Ukrainian president appeared to acknowledge when he announced plans to submit an additional bill to parliament protecting the independence of the embattled anti-corruption agencies. And crucially, what is widely seen as a power grab by the president's inner circle also has the potential of undermining public morale at a critical time in the war. All of this also feeds into a Russian narrative of Zelensky as an illegitimate leader of his country who Russia cannot negotiate with. But it would be a mistake to assume that Russia can simply wait until such time when Ukrainians are too exhausted to continue resisting Russia's invasion or when Western support will stop keeping Ukraine in the fight. Even if Europeans may become disillusioned with Zelensky, Russia's war against Ukraine is too much of an existential question for European security that they will abandon Kyiv just because they do not agree with its anti-corruption policies. nor is it clear for how long Russia can sustain the intensity of its ground and air campaigns against Ukraine, or how long these will provide even the kinds of incremental gains that they currently achieve. Once implemented, Trump's new plan for arming Ukraine by selling military equipment to European NATO allies who would then deliver it to Kyiv is likely to blunt the effectiveness of the Russian air campaign and stymie its ground offensive. The time that Moscow and Kyiv are both playing for is therefore unlikely to get either of them any closer to achieving their war aims. But preventing the other side's victory, be it on the battlefield or at the negotiation table, may well be enough for now for both Putin and Zelensky. Continuing their war of attrition currently is the second best solution that both presidents can agree on. The outcome of the third round of talks between their negotiators indicates that they may have reached such an implicit understanding already. A big thank you to all of our readers, listeners, followers and subscribers. Signing up to the newsletter is the best way to make sure you don't miss out on anything, and you'll get our newsletter and podcast delivered straight to your inbox wherever you are in the world. Importantly, you'll also be able to read the full written version of all of our pieces, which gives all of the background links to the information we cite in case you want to dive deeper and, like us, like to look at primary sources and check your facts. You can register for free at navigatingthevortex.com. You can also subscribe for subscriber-only access to comments and chats and other special subscriber-only benefits. You can find all these details in the podcast show notes as well. We hope you'll share Navigating the Vortex with anyone you think might find it of interest. If you like the show, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you are listening.